Kilde: Svend Grundtvig, Danske folkeeventyr.
A fairy tale as an example of what we can do to transform visions and hopes into targets, and not only this, but to realize these hopes step by step, all the way to a life that corresponds to the deepest desires of your heart. And the best thing is, you don't have to be an overachiever or become a different person to do this. You just have to have the courage to take the first step. In my opinion, one of the best examples on the subject of how can I strive for a fulfilled and satisfied life.
Oh, I was dreaming. I was dreaming, Princess said. But this is a ghastly dreaming of yours today, exclaimed the wizard. What have you been dreaming again? I dreamed of a king who possessed an only daughter who was stolen from him 7 years ago. That's you exactly, he cried furiously that he almost ate her now. The princess was terribly frightened by this and did not dare to come back to her dreams as soon as she heard it, but she still had to have the other questions answered. So she let him sleep peacefully for a while, but then she began to snore again, and the sorcerer woke up. You've gone to the devil with your snoring tonight, grumbled the sorcerer. Yes, I am also quite unhappy about these dreams, she sighed. Well, what kind of dream have you had now? He asked. I dreamed of an old soldier standing guard out in the forest by a sign house. How many years do you suppose he has to stand there? The old wizard said, he'll never know. But I do, he might be relieved once. But there he'd have to call out, as it hisses in the air and thunders in the earth. Listen, who flies and flutters in the air, come down now and relieve me. I've stood here so many long years, now shall you stand there for all eternity? I should go and stand sentinel in his place. Heschel, pay attention, said the princess. But why do you always say that? He asked. Oh, I only said it in my dreams.
Then they fell asleep again, but it wasn't long before the sorcerer was woken up again by the snoring, and wanted to know what she had been dreaming about. Oh, well, I dreamt of an old woman who has been translating people here for as long as I can remember. How long will she have to do that? He said, yeah, well, I have known this already, but she will never know. If she could get a Christian man under her hand, and break his neck, and then suck 3 drops of his blood, she might go where she pleased. Heschel, take notice, said the princess. I don't want to hear that any more, cried the wizard, and now don't ever disturb my night's rest or I'll break your neck myself. Then he fell into a deep sleep and snored so that the whole house trembled and shook. In the morning the magician got up, had his breakfast and went on his way. Then the princess changed the hackle back into hands and gave him something to eat, and told him to go down to the beach ahead of him. She would follow him as soon as the sorcerer was far enough away. Then she turned him into a little wheel, which she made roll down to the beach, and there it remained, until the princess herself came and turned it into a human being again. Then they both got into the old woman's boat. Fool about, mother, and put us over, young Hans cried to her. Yes, have you also brought me an answer to my question? Inquired the hag. When we are on the other side, you shall have it, replied Hans. And when they had reached the shore safely and had come a good way inland, he called back to her what she had to do to be free of her service. Oh, if you had only told me sooner, she cried after him, I could have finished by now. They walked on and until they came to the sign house, and they told the old soldier how he might be relieved from his post. And scarcely had they passed him well, when there was a whooshing in the air, and a thundering in the earth, and that was the wizard hastening after the fugitives. Then the soldier cried out, as he had just learned, listen, who flies and flutters in the air? Well, come down, for I've stood here 300 long years, and now shalt thou stand there for all eternity. Now the evil sorcerer had to come down and stand sentinel, and there still this evil man stands. Afterwards, the very young Hans and the princess went to the king, whose daughter she was. Young Hans took her by the hand and presented her, saying, "Here is your daughter, who has been stolen from you 7 years ago." The king didn't want to believe it at first, but then the princess said, "But daddy, can't you remember that I, still a little child at the time, fell down once and stabbed myself in the right hand with a sharp knife, and here is still the scar from it?" Then the king was so pleased that he had found his girl again that he offered Hans the princess in marriage out of gratitude, and also half of the kingdom, and after his death the whole empire. But Hans thanked him very kindly and said that he had to go home now, in order to get rich Mr. Larsens' daughter Karen at the end. So the king gave him a ton of gold and an automobile with a driver and servants in livery. Then he travelled unto the lord of the manor who had the strange tree in his garden. He told him about it, and immediately 8 strong men were sent for of whom had to dig on either side. And there they found exactly a ton of gold and a ton of silver. Yes, man, a ton of gold on one side and a ton of silver on the other. The landlord was very happy about it, and he gave Hans half of it as a finder's fee, and that was put on his car, and then he drove on. He still had to go into the rich farmer with the 3 beautiful daughters who couldn't get any suitors. Young Hans told him that he should sweep the doors half in and half out, then enough suitors would come every day. Then the farmer, in the great joy of his heart at this instruction, immediately told him that he could have one of his daughters as his wife. But Hans did not want any of the 3, for he was already engaged, he said. Then the farmer wanted to give him 100 pounds sterling. But Hans thanked him for this too, saying that he already had enough money. Then he drove on to his mother's house and asked if he could stay there for the night. The woman began to cry and said that it was heartless to mock poor people. It was easy to see that she could not receive such a fine gentleman. But then Hans jumped out of the carriage and said, "Don't cry, dear mummy, it's me, young Hans, your precious son." She couldn't believe it at first view, but at last she recognized Hans after all, and he told her his whole story, and there was unbelievable joy and happiness in the farmhouse parlor. Early the next morning Hans drove up to Peter Larsens' farm in his Ford Transit Custom, with liveried servants behind him. Peter's daughter Karen was just about to feed the cattle in the stable, but of course she had to see what was coming. But when she saw the bright red vehicle drive straight into the yard, she was so surprised that she fell into a pile of manure, with a bundle of hay in her arms. Rich Peter Larsen came out and kowtowed. Then young Hans said, "It's only me, dear Peter Larsen. May I have your daughter Karen now, for now I have been at the end of the world, and you'll still remember that you slapped me on my cheek, and said that, when I had been there, I would have young Karen."
And Hans did indeed finally get Karen, and they got married, and now they live on the farm of the rich Peter Larsen. Larsen is their groom now, and the couple already have big children. They go around selling milk cream and tobacco in rich quantities, and, well, now I can't think of anything else.
The Danish fairy tale is now over, and the fox, the hen and the cock, they are going home. Goodbye to all.